Today we will be in Chapter 2, Section 4, solving linear equations with a variable on only one side of the equation. Our two topic objectives for today are to solve linear equations with a variable on only one side of the equation and to solve equations containing decimal numbers or fractions. Okay, 2.4, solving equations with a variable on one side, is really just going to be working through a lot of problems. I'm going to give you 6 steps of how you should approach these problems, and I recommend kind of using these as a checklist, but then after I give you these 6 things, we're just going to work through a whole bunch of problems. So I'm not going to work any homework problems per se, because these are exactly like the ones that are up on the computer. So we're just going to work through a whole bunch of problems today. But first, let's do our checklist. First thing you're going to do is you're going to look for fractions. So if the equation contains fractions, you are going to multiply both sides of the equation by the least common denominator. This will get rid of our fractions. So that's our LCD, or least common denominator. Okay, after you do that, you're going to use the distributive property. To remove parentheses. Then you're going to combine like terms. You're going to use the addition property. That's the one from section 2.2. Then you're going to use the multiplication property. That's the one we covered in our last section, which is 2.3. And then you're going to check your solution after you're complete. So each of these problems has the potential of using all 6 of these, or you might not start at number 1. If your problem doesn't have fractions, you might just skip to use the distributive property. If you don't have parentheses, you might get to skip all the way down to 3. And you might even get to skip down to 4 or 5 to solve some of these problems. So I will show you how we're going to utilize this, and I will leave that up on the screen for a little bit. So here's an example. We have 2x plus 4 equals 10. Okay, we don't have any fractions, so we don't have to do number 1. Do we have any parentheses that we need to remove? No, so we don't have to do step number 2. Combining like terms is step number 3. Can we combine our 2x plus our 4? No, those aren't like terms, so we don't even have to do step number 3. So we get to jump all the way down to step number 4, which is use the addition property. So that means that's getting rid of our plus 4 right here. So we're going to subtract 4 from both sides, which will leave us 2x equals 10 minus 4 is 6. Now it's step number 5. We're going to use the multiplication property. So you can use either the opposites method or the reciprocal method. I'm going to use the opposites method in this case, but you can use either one. So I'm going to just simply divide both sides by 2. 2 divided by 2 is going to be 1, so that leaves us just our x. 6 divided by 2 is 3. So we get x equals 3. For the purposes of this homework, I'm not going to be checking my solution because we're going to be working a lot of problems. But on your homework, you're going to want to check your solutions to make sure those are correct, especially before you do your quizzes. Okay, let's do another problem. Example, negative 2r minus 6 equals a negative 3. Step 1 is looking for fractions. We don't have any. Step 2 is looking for parentheses. We don't have any. Step 3 is combining like terms. We can't do that. So we have to go to step 4 again. So we have this negative 6. So we're going to add 6 to both sides. That'll leave us with negative 2r equals negative 3 plus 6 will leave us with a positive 3. Now we have this negative 2 times our r. Our step 5 is using the multiplication property. So we're going to divide by negative 2 on both sides. And that leaves us with r equal to negative 3 over 2. Okay. Let's do one that has an additional step in it, shall we? Alright. Hopefully those first two don't seem too difficult. It's really just following the steps that are listed and then just working through the problem. So let's do, we have 16 equals 4x plus 6 minus 2x. Step 1, do we have fractions? We do not. Step 2, do we have parentheses? No. Step 3, can we combine like terms? Well, we have a 4x and we have a negative 2x, so yes, we can. We can start with step 3 and combine our like terms first. So we have 16 equals 4x minus 2x will give us a positive 2x plus 6. Okay, step 3 is using the addition method. So we're going to subtract our 6 from both sides. That'll leave us with 10 equals to 2x. Use our multiplication property for step 5, which will be divide both sides by 2. 10 divided by 2 is 5. 2 divided by 2 is 1, so that leaves us with an x. So our answer is 5. Hopefully that's not stumping. We did step 3 up here. We did step 4 down here. And we did step 5 right here. And then theoretically we would do step 6 by checking our problem. Okay, let's do some more. Remember, these are exactly like the ones on your homework. I literally took these straight off of the homework. I just changed the numbers that were in the problems. So you will not be seeing anything on your homework that you're not seeing right now in these notes. 5x minus 2, x plus 4 equals 3. Okay, step 1 says fractions. Do we have any fractions? We do not. Step 2 says use the distributive property to get rid of our parentheses. Do we have parentheses? We do. We have parentheses right here. So we need to distribute in this negative 2 to both of these things in order to get rid of this parentheses. So we're going to take the negative 2 times the x, and we're going to take the negative 2 times the positive 4. So that gives us 5x. Negative 2 times x will just give negative 2x. And negative 2 times a positive 4 will give us a negative 8. And that equals 3. So here we distribute it. Okay, now we need to combine like terms. So we have a 5x minus a 2x, which will give us a 3x. And we still have that minus 8 equals 3. Now we need to do the addition property. So we need to get this 8 over to the other side. So we're going to add 8 to both sides. That'll leave us with 3x equals 3 plus 8 is 11. Now we need to do the multiplication property. In order to get this x by itself, we have 3 times x, so we're going to divide it by 3 and divide the other side by 3. 3 divided by 3 is just going to be 1, so that's an x. And 11 divided by 3 is just 11 over 3. I would ask you if you have any questions about how I'm doing this, but you obviously cannot respond, so I hope you're keeping up with this. If not, there's lots of problems on your homework, and I really recommend using the similar exercise button in the homework for problems that you struggle with. I've showed you this before in previous assignments, and it'll give you like the exact same problem with just slightly different numbers, so you can use the same methods to work through it and get some extra practice that way. Hopefully you're seeing though that we're really using the exact same steps in each of these problems. We just might have to do, you know, an extra step. Like this one we had to distribute first, and then we were able to combine like terms and then use the addition and multiplication properties. But we're using the exact same steps and we're going in the exact same order in each of these problems. But we will do another one. I think we have another 4 or 5 problems. Yeah, about 5 more problems. We might skip a few of those, so we will see. All right, so example. We have 3p minus, parentheses, 2p plus 5 equals 7. So do we have fractions? No, so we're going to do step 1. Step 2 says we distribute. Now, if you look, we do have parentheses here, but we just have a minus out front. Remember, that's the same thing as having like a minus 1 out front, multiplying everything. So we still distribute in that negative to everything on the inside. So we still take that times the positive 2p, and we still take that times the positive 5. So we have a 3p, and then negative 1 times 2p will just be a negative 2p. Negative 1 times a positive 5 will just be a minus 5 equals 7. So we distribute. Now here we have 3p and negative 2p, so that means we need to do combine like terms. So that'll be just a positive p minus 5 equals 7. Now we need to do the addition property. So we need to get rid of that negative 5 by adding 5 to both sides. So then we're left with p equals 12. In this case, we didn't have to do step 5, which is the multiplication property, because our p is by itself already. And so we're already done with that. Alright, let's do another one. We'll do 1/5 x plus 1 equals 1. Okay, step 1 says if we have a fraction, then we're going to multiply it both sides by the least common denominator. So we do have one fraction, which is a 5. We don't have any other fractions. So what is the least common denominator of 5? 5. So we need to LCD equals 5. So we need to multiply both sides by 5. So we're going to take 5 times 1 over 5, whoops, x plus 1 equals 1 times 5. The whole point of doing this, multiplying by the LCD, is to get rid of this fraction, because fractions just make things more complicated. So if we can get rid of the fraction early on, it's going to simplify the problem. 5 times the 1 over 5 is going to be 1, and since this is multiplying, like this 1/5, since that's multiplying everything inside that parentheses, we don't have to worry about distributing that 5 into anything else. So that's just going to cancel out right there. So that's going to leave us with x plus 1 equals 1 times 5 is 5. We don't have to combine like terms or distribute, so we get to skip both of those levels. Now we just get to do the addition property, which will be minus 1 minus 1. So we're left with x equal 4. That one's a little bit more confusing, so I hope you see what happened there and why we don't distribute in. We could have distributed this in first, but our order says to multiply by the LCD out front, and then that gets rid of the fraction and we don't have to distribute in the 5th and deal with all of that. So this actually is a nicer way of doing it. Let's do another one with a fraction. Example. X plus 3 over 4 equals 2. Okay, this one we can think about the LCD again. We do have a fraction. We have a fraction right here, and 4 is the bottom. We don't have any other fractions, so our LCD is 4. So we just need to multiply both sides by 4. And this is really the same way that we've always been doing it. So we need to multiply this side by 4, and we need to multiply the 2 by 4. So we multiply this, and that'll reduce down. So we're left with just x plus 3 equals 2 times 4 is 8. Subtract our 3 over. So we get x equals 5. This is the same thing that we were doing in 2.3 with the multiplication property. Because if you think about it, when we were doing the opposites, we were thinking, okay, this 4 is dividing all of this, and so we would multiply by 4 on both sides. When we did the opposites method, it's the exact same thing here. We multiplied by the 4, and that got rid of it, and that left us with the x plus 3 on top, and then 2 times 4 is the 8. So this really is the same thing that we were doing with the opposites. It's just called the LCD. And you'll see why we call it this way in just a moment, and it'll make it a little bit, like it does make our problems simpler. Okay. I'm going to move on from that one. I sometimes wish you guys were here so that I knew when to take the paper away, but I guess you guys can always pause it if you need to look at a problem longer. Okay, we have d over 2 plus 3d equals 14. Okay, we do have a fraction, so we need to do the least common denominator. All these denominators of whole numbers, remember, are just 1, so our least common denominator is 2. So our LCD is 2, so we need to multiply everything by 2. So I'm going to just stick it out front. 2 times d over 2 plus 3d equals 14 times 2. Now this one we will have to distribute this 2 into both of them, because notice that there was an addition sign in here. So 2 times d over 2 is just going to leave us with d. 2 times 3d will give us 6d. And 14 times 2 will be 28. So here we distributed. Now we can combine like terms, because we have a d and a 6d. which will give us 7D equals 28. Next we would do the addition property, but we don't need to. We don't have anything that we're adding. So let's just do the multiplication property. We have the 7 multiplying on this side, so we're going to divide both sides by 7. And that'll go away. That leaves us with D equals 28 over 7 is 4. Okay, so far all of our fraction problems, we've only had one fraction in the problem, so that's made getting the LCD really easy. So obviously we need to do one where we have more than one fraction. This is the hardest problem I'm going to work, and it's the hardest problem you're going to see on your homework. Okay, now we have lots and lots of fractions. We have 1/5 x minus 3/8 x equals 1/10. Okay, so instead of having to, add all these and deal with all these fractions, we're going to get rid of the fractions early on by finding the least common denominator between 5, 8, and 10. And if you don't know how to find the least common denominator, then the easiest way to do that is to write out your 5s, your 8s, and your 10s until you come up with something that they have in common. So we have 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, etc. Your 8s would be 8, 16, 24, 32, 40, 48. Your 10s would be 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. But if you look, we have a 40, a 40, and a 40. So that means our least common denominator is going to be 40. Okay, so what does that mean? That means we're taking everything times 40. And that sounds way worse than it actually is. So we have 40 times 1 over 5 x minus 3 over 8 x equals 1 over 10 times 40. Oh, excuse me, sorry. I didn't mean to pull that down. Okay, so this 40 has to distribute into each of these things. Okay, so we're going to distribute. So we have 40 times 1 over 5x minus 40 times 3 over 8x equals, and then we have 40 over 10 on this side, which reduces down to 4. 40 divided by 5 will give us 8, so we have 8x. 40 divided by 8 will give us 5. We still have that 3 out there, so that's 3 times 5, which is 15x. That might have been a lot to do right there, so let me do it over here. 40 times 3 over 8x. This 40 goes away and becomes a 5, and we get rid of that 8. So we have 5 times 3x, which gives us our 15x. And we saw that minus out there because there's a minus out front. And that equals 4. Now we have an 8x minus 15x, so we need to combine like terms. So we have 8x minus 15x will give us a negative 7x equals 4. We don't have anything to use the addition method with, so we're just going to use the multiplication method, and we're going to divide both sides by the negative 7. And that leaves us with x equals a negative 4 over 7. Again, this is the hardest style of problem that you will have on the homework. So if you struggle through this, this is really the problem that you're going to want to utilize that help me solve this, or excuse me, not help me, well, you can use the help me solve this button too, but you can use the similar exercises and it'll keep regenerating problems that are very similar to this to give you some extra practice. So like I said, these are identical to the ones on your homework, so I'm not going to actually pull up your homework this time. So good luck on your homework and good luck on your quizzes.